Good evening, everyone. Call the Brandon Select Board to order February 24th, 7 o'clock. Is there a motion on the agenda as it's been presented?
Yeah, I'll make that.
Second.
Mr. Coolidge moves to approve, and Mr. Bailey seconds. Are there any changes to be made? If not, all in favor of the agenda, say aye. Aye. Item 2 is to approve the minutes of February 10th. Is there a motion? Mr. Wyman moves to approve.
Second.
Mr. Bailey seconds. Any errors or omissions in the minutes as submitted? If not, all in favor of approval of the minutes as submitted, say aye. Aye.
I'm going to abstain.
Mr. Coolidge abstains. Item 3, the town manager's report. Mr. Ackerton.
Square report for the weeks of February 10th and 17th. Segment 6, we have been working with Du Bois and King and V-Trans to come up with a solution to address and repair the sidewalk spalling, so more to come on that. Other happenings, Wright Construction's been repairing the roof right behind us here at the town hall. They started today, they should be done on this side tomorrow, and we'll be moving forward with the other side here shortly. Had the bid opening for the Churchill Road culvert on Friday, and Hutchins was the apparent low bidder, so we'll be sending a notice of award out to them this week. And that will be a summer project, only a couple weeks long right there, so shouldn't hold up traffic too bad. Attended local government day in Montpelier on the 13th. While I was there, I met with Representative Jerome and Robert Fish from the Vermont Department of Public Service to discuss viable options for extending broadband service to Brandon and the possibility of fiber optic to the downtown area. Bill and I will be reaching out to some of the providers in our area to discuss this further. We're hoping to see if we can get the school on board with this too. Been working with Devin Neary from the RPC to prepare the grant application for the parking area behind the mobile station, so hopefully should have that wrapped up here in a week. And letters have been sent to delinquent tax accounts that have not followed their agreed payment plan. Per our tax policy, these accounts are now due in full if they have not followed the plan, so we have been meeting with folks on that. Rec news, February break camp ended thanks to Colleen Wright and Sue Danforth for teaching kids how to line dance and play cornhole. See you for April break. Brandon Rec, via of our affiliation with the Great Vermont State Cornhole Championship, organized a tournament as part of the Rutland Rec 2020 Winterfest. This was a great way to advertise our second year, and 19 teams participated. For more information about 2020 Championship being held on July 18th, right here at the Brandon Inn, check out the cornholevermont.com website. There is a New York City spring bus trip planned for May 9th. This is a new trip that is being offered by the Brandon Rec, and trip leader Colleen Wright will be leading the escape to New York. Registration online at our new website, brandonvtmyrec.com. Oh, right, sorry, Charlene just corrected me. brandonvt.myrec.com. More dots in there. New England Wildlife Encounters are back with 2 shows planned at the Brandon Town Hall on February 28th at 12 and 6:30 p.m. This popular wildlife show features some opportunities for youth and adults to see some critters that they would not normally see in the woods around here. $5 per person and tickets available at the door only. This past weekend, the Brandon Town Hall hosted the inaugural Brandon Area Toy Project Neshobe PTO Mom Prom. This fundraiser was attended by dozens of ladies who dressed up and got down to some fun 80s, 90s, and 2000s music. Thanks to Mace Place for providing adult beverage service.
Thank you, Mr. Atherton. Any questions for the town manager from the board? No. I have none.
I was just wondering how many bidders that we did have on the Churchill Road culvert.
6, I believe. 5 or 6, yeah.
Quite a bit of interest in it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Gunness, Mr. Wyman.
And following Doug's question, what was the next bid? Don't care who it was, but how far apart was the
And I
second
think the
bid?
next one was 4,000 more. I think it was 103, 107 on the high ones. Like,
Did we not have problems with Hutchins the last time we had them as a contractor?
we didn't have them as contractors, that was the fire district.
What's that? Oh, that was fire district. Okay.
So because this is federal funds, the Forest Service is the RE on this, they're doing the in-kind match with us for this. We have to take the low bidder unless we find that there's something that's been wrong with the bid. And Dave Donahue, who works with RE with the Forest Service, did the tabulation Friday and couldn't find anything wrong, so.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's in the woods.
Right.
There's no water and sewer there.
I know, I'm still disappointed that,
Well, they did a good job on their 73 this year, you know, so that was.
right.
Questions from the public for the town manager? Anyone in attendance tonight, something for Mr. Atherton? Okay, if not, we'll move along. Fourth item, public comment and participation. This is also for items not on the agenda. We generally start with the board. Mr. Wyman? Members of the public with something they'd like to bring before the select board that doesn't appear later on the agenda. Quiet and friendly group tonight. Mr. Clark, thank you.
Candidates night this Thursday, sorry about that. We have the chamber's doing a candidates night, a little debate here in this room. 6:30 Thursday night. Mr. Hopkins, Mr. Bailey, and Ms. Walter, moderated by Devin Fuller. So try to attend if you could.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Other public comment participation tonight? Mr. Moore?
Well, just a reminder that the district school board meeting is on Wednesday, 6:30 at the school.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Others? Mr.
I
Bailey?
have a quick question. Do some grants require being shovel-ready and others not? Or how does that work? It varies.
Sometimes they pay for engineering and design and stuff, is that what you mean? And sometimes
You have to be ready to
they pay only
go,
for
correct?
construction. Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that right?
so it varies.
Majority of our grants do have a planning part to it, so like Park Street's kind of the perfect example that doing that was, you know, to and stuff. But yeah, sometimes there's a planning grant, sometimes we have to be ready to go.
Ready to go, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Okay, we'll move along. Item 5 is a Mill Lane concern. Do you care to introduce this? Mr.
Sure,
Atherton?
so actually Mr. Jonathan Blake is here tonight, so I can go rough him up on the way in. So, him and I have talked about this a couple times, that he owns land down on Mill Lane on the end, so go through B-Hop and Maze Road that goes down there, he owns the land down there. And the road has gotten a little bit narrower with some construction on one of the buildings there. I actually sat out there today to take a look at it, so Sean and I looked at it once, and Jonathan's here to.
I can just present some visuals.
Yeah, please do.
I don't think I made enough. I think I made 6.
Thank you. So,
The main picture that has the Jeep on it is the upper property where Russell used to own the mill. And over the 10 years that I owned Mill Street, that is getting filled in more and more and more, and the parking's been coming up from the mill house. The parking originally 10 years ago was only at Virginia's in front of the door, and it's managed to creep up, so it's not just the Abishon block that is coming in, but also the parking where that Jeep is. Cooley's, I think over now, is that their name, Cooley or something like that? So that's been creeping up in one direction, and the other picture shows that when they finish doing the apartment house, that not only is that new building been put there, but there's been a retaining wall, a loading area, and a set of stairs that were also never there. And if you can see how much distance there is from the parked Jeep to that, I know a town truck can no longer get down there, and my own personal plow truck, my 1-ton can barely get down there now. It's just been constricted to the point now where, I think Mill Street, the town of Granite lost control over that road for maintaining it. It was a town-maintained road with the town plow for years and years when there was houses there. We agreed to stop having the town maintain it until which time I want to develop the property, put housing or something back down there. That time is around the corner now. I hope to do something down there within the next year. I've had meetings with the zoning administrator about what I'd like to start looking at down there. And I'm just afraid now that the way that's been constricted on both sides there, it's going to be very difficult to maximize the ability to develop the 6 acres that's down there. Quite a bit of land. There's town streetlight down there. And I just wanted to bring it to the town's attention that in both those areas, the encroachment that's coming from both sides, it's kind of squeezing the lane right out.
Mr. Blake, do we have surveys, or do you have a survey of your property that shows the width? Do we know the width of this road?
My property up top, my property doesn't even start until you get down to the bottom of the hill.
Mhm.
And actually, I'm glad that you brought it that way. They also, when they redid the work behind the option block, they curved the road and tipped the road so it no longer drains over onto the Alvashon block property, but now comes down the edge of the road and washes out and creates a silt area down there, and has actually shut that road down once before during a storm.
It's draining, if you're looking down the hill, it's draining to the left or the
Yes,
right? To the left.
Drains to the left, now it always used to drain to the right. Now it collects, builds up steam, washes out the road, and there's a big sediment pile down there now. The snow's melting, so it's easy to see in spring. I just kind of want to get a jump on spring right now. But my property does not end, and it has been surveyed by Matt Bonner, and I have several surveys that show, and we have no disagreement about who owns what.
Is the mill lane width indicated on your survey?
No, my understanding was from 10 years ago when I bought it, was considered a town road, which while you maintain a 3-rod right-of-way, 3-rod
That's what I was going to
wide
ask.
right-of-way.
Is it the
My
standard
intention,
48 feet?
49 and a half.
Everything's 3-rod.
Yeah.
Because it was maintained when there was housings, mobile homes, and the main house that was down there was plowed continuously to the end of the road. They had to turn around and plow back out with a town truck.
Yeah, it was probably 7 years ago that the town decided to not winter maintain it.
Correct. And I said I was going to tear down those buildings that had been vandalized to the point of not even being able to restore them, so I just tore them.
Were permits issued or sought for the parking landing or the retaining
I
wall?
wouldn't know, Seth, I'd have
We don't
to
know.
pull the zoning files from them.
I didn't
Figure that
know.
out. And we did meet with the owner of the Smith block and bring this to his attention last fall. And that's kind of where it left, where it stopped, so. Jonathan and I have talked about it a couple times, Sean and I went down and looked at it, and there definitely was some concern, and I thought we were gonna actually see some movement, and then nothing's happened, so.
If I could, when the construction started there over a year ago, they basically took over all my property at the bottom of the hill off my permission for a staging area for construction equipment, for bricks, for loaders, for materials. And that was pretty annoying that was going on with the Hammer and Bring.
Was this on the right side at the bottom of the hill?
Like
Like where
right at the
there's-
very bottom of the hill, as soon as it starts to flatten out, that's when my property starts.
Yeah,
And all that landing area down there was used by them. The people that were I think what their name was, they were great. What was it?
Alpine.
They were awesome. He called me and said, can I park 5 of my vehicles down and pay $25 a month per vehicle? I said, absolutely. He paid full, maintained right where he wanted to park, but then it was just literally hijacked from me from this project. And I have many pictures showing heavy equipment, excavators, walls, a cement mixer, staging areas. It was. Right now, I just want to get it back to where it was when I bought it, so I can start looking forward to me, to actually
to
developing this
improve
property.
it, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
When
sir.
we look at it today, on the right side, in one of the pictures, you can see the mailbox is there. And there was a large concrete block, and you get over a few more feet to the telephone pole. So, originally was the road out to where the telephone pole is, and that block new, or the mailbox new, or? It seems
Yes, that
like
is-
there's quite a bit of room on the right side.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of room on the right side, and that's kind of been taken over by the housing that I'll just continue to call the Gina Russell Mill House. She had it for quite a number of years. I
So
believe.
they've encroached inward also?
Yes,
You
that's
feel?
all been leveled up little by little, little, it keeps creeping up over the last 10 years. Like I said, originally when I bought the property, everybody parked at the house, you turn right and drive to the house. nobody's parking up top. And the mailbox probably showed up maybe 5 years ago. I was trying to get the postmaster to let me know when you remember when that delivery started happening, because there was no mailbox there until these people owned it, the current owners. And I don't have any problems with them, I don't know if they know where they're supposed to be or not. So since it's a town right away, at least I believe it's a town right away, I just thought I'd leave it up to Brandon.
So what makes sense? I mean, should we see whether there was any permit needed and if it was issued and if there were conditions for the work on either side of the road first and establish, I mean, the center line will have to be established. Is that a reasonable next step, or is there something else we can do?
I believe so.
I think that sounds reasonable.
Can we ask you to do that? Sure. And report back to the board?
Mr. Atkinson's been great at keeping in contact with me and keeping roots on the ground, keeping an eye on stuff. And as I say, I'm just now getting to the point where after 10 years, it's time to look down. Now that Brandon's where it is, you guys have done a great job, in my opinion, Brandon.
Well, thank you. So this is one part of what you're talking about, and then in the longer or intermediate term, you're talking about the town resuming winter maintenance of the road. Yeah.
Yes, when there's a time, there's actually a residence down there, and I personally, my long view for down there is small, super energy efficient, 900 to 1,200 square foot houses. And when I take away floodplain, take away river corridor, everything that's down there now, there is still probably room for 10 to 12 really nicely developed houses down there where people could walk everything to Rutland out to, and Brandon out to, got everything all squared away. That's kind of my dream. There's a real shortage of small energy efficient houses under $200,000. And that's what I hope to see happen there in the long run, kind of a retirement plan.
The designated downtown and the energy efficient small house movement are, I think, certainly good partners for Brandon.
Yes.
For Brandon's future. Yeah.
Yes, and
And this
if you
seems
don't
like,
mind,
this is
awesome.
probably one of the largest parcels that's within a stone's throw of the designated downtown that's not otherwise being used right now.
6 acres with about 1,000 foot river frontage. And if Brandon wants to have their trail around Brandon too, I've talked to Mr. Moore and talked to Mr. Atherton about that possibility. If they can have right of way, I'm more than happy to designate a river corridor around there for a path also. A lot of possibility there.
How many acres do you own down there?
6.
How many?
6?
Mr. Giles, did you have?
Well, I'm just curious, if it is a road, it seems like we should have a map showing where the road is with, do we have that? Do we have a state document of some kind?
Well, we have the state highway map, but they're not gonna show the.
They won't show the
widths.
widths.
They won't have the survey widths. I mean, that road's been there forever. It's gonna be, we'll look for, see what we've got. There might be an old map that shows it there, but if it's been recently surveyed,
Yeah.
which I think it has, we should be able to determine.
Yeah, it's definitely.
Yeah, I know where it is.
Yeah.
So I couldn't get in the vault this afternoon because the clerk and assistant clerk went home sick. I was going to get in there and see what I could find for a survey, but that is locked up, so I wasn't giving me the code.
Didn't the original road come out with the park?
I don't know, Tracy.
How's it?
Yeah, I think it used to cut around mine.
Used to come out, Tom's barber, the barber shop, I think was over into the,
In the old town offices, yeah.
yeah. But that was the original road out of there, right?
I think so, yeah.
Mm.
And they probably cut both ways.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
And the original Smith Estate, historically back in the 1800s, was the last house that bulldozed on the top of the hill. Please don't know that.
So does that sound reasonable if we ask Mr.
Absolutely,
Atherton to
yeah.
look into?
No, I'm only here just trying to put
I
another
appreciate
set of eyes on
you
it.
listening to us. Yeah.
Yep. I just appreciate anything you do.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Blake. Thanks for the information. Thanks, Mr. Atherton, for taking care of that. Item 6 is the Mays Place Revolving Loan Fund. Mr. Moore, Economic Development Officer.
Thank you. I'm going to read into the letter that's submitted to the select board. On February 12th, the Brandon Revolving Loan Fund Committee met to consider a loan request from Aaron and Andy Donor, owners of the restaurant Mays Place. The donors presented to the board their plan to move Mays Place to another Brandon location, the building that once housed the Book and Leaf bookstore. As successful borrowers of the Brandon Revolving Loan Fund monies who repaid their loan early, The loan committee reviewed the plans and heard a presentation, but responding with a unanimous yes to the request. Despite the past year of heavy construction directly in front of the business, May's had their most successful year to date. When faced with the proposition of moving, due to the building owner deciding not to renew the lease, the donors were committed to maintaining a breakfast lunch restaurant in our town. These successful entrepreneurs have fully invested in our community, and the committee felt that the community should continue to invest in them. And Andy and Aaron are here to answer any questions you guys might have.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Thank you to Mr. Donor and Mrs. Donor for being here and for your project. Does the board have any questions for them or comment?
No, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Wyman and a second by Mr. Bailey. Is there discussion? Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That's unanimous. Thank you again for your project moving around. It's a significant investment, and we appreciate you keeping your business in downtown.
Thank you very much for the support.
Item 7, a request from the Brandon Free Public Library. You see our librarian is here. Would you like to introduce it, Molly?
Yes. I'm here on behalf of the library to request that the town agree to be a pass-through entity for a community development block grant as we embark on an accessibility project at the library. And the grant deadline is around the corner, so we're hoping to get an approval this evening to warn a public hearing.
And the accessibility project for those, I mean, we've got information, but do you want to introduce it to the public, just highlights?
Yep, so we are in the very preliminary phases of exploring an accessibility project to put a lift in the library to increase access to our second floor, potentially the third floor, to put an ADA accessible bathroom into the library, which we don't currently have, and to increase space for dynamic spaces for programming, for kids, for adults. Basically, that's it.
Pleasure of the board?
Yeah, I move that we support the request to be a pass-through entity.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Giles and a second by Mr. Wyman to have the town serve as the pass-through entity for the library's accessibility project. Is there discussion? If not, ready to vote, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Any abstentions? The ayes have it.
Well, do you need a written resolution from the board that supports this, or does the minutes suffice?
I think the minutes will suffice.
Okay.
I think the one additional thing is that we wanted to have a public hearing on March 23rd, which is the town, the board meeting in March.
You want to do it like before the select board meeting?
Yeah, so there's a 15-day window and a 7-day window before the deadline, so that puts us in that zone.
Yeah, we can just open the room up early and you guys can go in here. What do you think, like half hour?
Thank you.
Is that something, do you schedule this room in the winter, Mr. Moore?
We do.
Could you coordinate with Mr. Moore about making sure that
I don't know.
making sure that- Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 8, consider the sale of town-owned property. We have an offer about a swamp lot. Mr. Atherton, you were approached?
Yeah, John Reynolds, who bought little pieces of land off us in the last couple of years. He wanted to own a piece of land on all points in Brandon. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, that's nice. Okay. Yeah.
He owns the lot. If you look at the tax map, he owns the lot 2 down that says Reynolds there, 612. That's the one he bought the first time. And he just saw this one and saw it was owned by the town. And I don't know if the board was interested in selling it to him. So here we are.
So it says in the letter, the town has held the swamp lot since 1939. It's 7 acres. He offers $100 to get it back on the tax rolls. What's the pleasure of the board?
I make a motion to take $100.
Mr. Wyman moves to accept the offer. Mr. Coolidge seconds. Is there discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Giles?
Yeah, I've done just a little bit of homework on this to kind of call around and figure out, what's going on with the value of this land. And I think I have a couple of concerns that I'd like to raise. The first is more general, which is one that we came upon early on when I was first on the board, which is it seems like when something comes up for sale, we should be under the habit of letting people know it's for sale. So if other people have an interest in this, it's kind of a public, open process. So there isn't the sense that somebody can get something by just kind of having it go up for sale without everybody knowing about it. So I think that's my first concern, that we should at least make it publicly known that this is for sale. And secondly, I called you may see on the map that one of the properties that's quite near theirs is the Nature Conservancy. And I was curious just what the value of land is out there. And whether or not $100 for 7 acres is kind of a fair deal. And I got a letter back, an email, really remarkably quickly. And this is from John Binhammer, who is the protection director of the Nature Conservancy. And he is interested in acquiring lands for the Nature Conservancy. And I won't read you his whole, it's a relatively short letter, but the general idea that he conveyed in this letter is that typical appraised values for swamplands, and here I'm quoting, from a data set maintained by appraiser Justice DeVries, generally run between $200 and $300 per acre. And so for 7 acres, we're talking about between $1,400 and $2,100. And so it seems like $100 is quite a bit less than what the value that I've been able to ascertain from the little bit of calling around I've made. And so I guess I'd like to suggest that we let people know if this is for sale, so if there are other people who are interested in this, they have the ability to come forward and make us an offer as well. And we don't be hasty about selling this branded asset without due diligence.
Can I add just a couple things? So, Nature Conservancy, and I actually brought this to your attention today when we were talking about, we're 501c3, so we will never get property taxes after they buy it.
Yeah. Sure.
So when this was started, when I became town manager, about getting rid of some of these swamp lots that we've sat on, that we acquired in tax sale or whatever, almost 100 years ago, most of them, the purpose was to get them back on the tax books so that we could actually collect at least something annually on this property instead of the town sitting on it. And that's what we've done, is sold them to mostly folks around here that are paying the taxes on it now. Where we haven't seen a penny from this property since 1939. So that was the whole purpose for us to move forward with selling these swamp lots.
Oh, I understand the desirability of selling them. I actually asked him about tax purposes, and he says that there's actually 2 ways that the Nature Conservancy deals with land ownership. One is that they own it and they put it into current use. And what, my experience from being in current use with the land I had in the last place I lived, I had 90 acres of forest land, is that the town receives the taxes on that land, and the state covers that amount. And so we'll actually be getting a taxable amount on the land that's in current use. And the other way is that they do where the state owns the land, and if the state owns the land, they do what's called pilot, which is payment in lieu of taxes.
But if the Nature Conservancy is a 501c3, they won't pay taxes anyway. It's no different than the Brandon Industrial Park.
He said he pays taxes on all the land that the Nature Conservancy owns.
Then they must not own it through the Nature Conservancy. Because they are a 501c3. Actually, I just looked it up again to confirm that. So,
the other thing is to put it in current use, if I remember right, I think it's going to be 25 acres. A minimum, which to be able to qualify for current use.
Right, no, that's true.
And the other thing, going back to on the advertisement of the land, as far as I guess I'm concerned that everybody, or not, I shouldn't say everybody, but I've been aware that properties that the town of Brandon owns are properties that we aren't taxes. And as far as I know, all those properties are for sale. So as far as having to advertise it, I think anybody could come into the town office, and if there was a piece of swamp law or whatever that Brandon owned, I believe that they could put a purchase, or be able to put a offer in on that piece of property. Am I right, Ron?
Well, you're right, and statute says that once we receive the offer, then we notice it in the paper, which does have a process that if 5% of the, registered voters don't approve of this, then they petition it, and then the sale doesn't go through.
So that's an important point. So this is what we came up with last time this happened, right? We had a swamp lot offer, and part of the process of selling is that we're going to publish that we have an offer and intend to sell, right? Is that what you just said?
Well, that we have to do the 1061. When we do it, the 1061 notice, we put in the paper.
Right.
So if the board approved this, my next call is to our attorney, say, can you draft 1061, and then it goes in the paper and a contract.
And so that's an
I think we run it for 3 weeks. So, it does seem backwards, but that's the process that we have with the state.
I feel like we had a pretty open-minded discussion at that time, and the result of it was that the consensus was that this notice of intent to sell, or the acceptance of the offer and the publication of the notice, constituted letting people know.
The difference that I stumbled onto today, because Dave was so good as to show me this notice, is that the requirement that it takes 5% of the voters in the town to overcome that bid is really pretty much guaranteeing that the sale will go through. Because there's no way you're going to get 5% of the town to get together to overturn a bid.
They did it 1 year to stop a budget.
Multiple times.
I think my suggestion is that it should just take one other person who wants to bid more to be able to bid for that land. And they shouldn't have to have, somebody else who's interested in this land shouldn't have to have the onus of finding 5% of the town to sign a petition so they can bid more for this land.
Did we, at the last time we talked about this, can you refresh us?
No,
If so-
I don't really know what you guys decided then either, so.
I know.
So let me forget about that part. Forget
It was
the
us.
process and just ask this.
All right, yeah.
I know what it was, because it was us. And Tim was going to look into it, and
Oh, was
there
this
was
the
a,
final piece?
yeah, there was a discussion about notifying the adjoining property owners, because it would be worth more to them than anybody to purchase.
Okay, so that's closely related to the question I was going to ask you, which is, if we publish the notice, and during that period, someone comes in and offers you more money, and you bring it to the board, can the board accept the higher offer or not?
Well, I wouldn't
Is it
think
too
if
late?
if you have accepted someone's offer, you can't really accept two offers.
Yes, just share.
Well, one, we're talking about selling this for an extremely low price to get it back on the tax bill. So my question becomes, do we have any kind of clue what kind of taxes would be on 7 acres of swampland? What would we possibly be receiving? I would expect close to nothing.
We had in here, what, $1,400 value on.
1,400 value would be a low end.
The value of the land, but I'm not, so the taxes of 1,400, it's gonna take a lot of years to make the difference between 100 and 1,400.
Exactly.
And then my second question is that if we take an offer and we do it and we have to post it in the paper, what's that cost us to run the ad?
That'll be more than $100.
So we're actually losing money selling the property.
Well, and I might add that I already know, John at the Nature Conservancy said that it's very likely that the Nature Conservancy would pay much more than that for that piece of land. And so that's one. And in a little bit of time, I called a few other people I know that own some swampland in town. When I mentioned that this value, they said they would gladly pay more than that for that land. So I already know 2 more people that would pay more than that for the land.
So we have a motion and a second to accept the offer. Is there further discussion?
But I just would like to reiterate the point that it's going to end up costing us money to sell this land at this price. That's my point.
Further discussion? Any public input? Always welcome. We're not the Ayatollahs. Yes, Mr.
Well, I still think that the neighboring properties need to be notified, because it's gonna be worth more to them. It means nothing when you put in the paper lot 42A or something. Nobody knows what that is, because they're not even consistent sometimes in the numbering, so.
Mr. Chair, I think if we were actively marketing land, like, look, we have, if we posted something up on the wall that said, we have these lots, we want to sell and make an offer. One thing, where then, now you have public notice, folks know that we are actively sort of marketing out what we have, which is not what we're doing. It's basically, it's been, someone's like, like we had one couple that wanted to buy a lot of contiguous lots because they acquired one large one. So it's not, I don't want it to sound like we're sort of, keeping the information from folks. It's that we've really not had any intention to actively market any of these swamp lots that we have. People just come to us and make an offer. It's, it's my obligation to bring this offer to the board. If they accept it or not, that's up to them. So, so I don't know how we would do it if we wanted to make a list and say, here's what we got.
Just on this map, there are 4 town of Brandon properties on this one map. And maybe that's a better way of doing it, would be putting the word out that we would be taking offers on.
And as I just said earlier, I've known it for growing up there. I knew that everything that, if there's a swamp lot and it's out there and it's in the town of Brandon owns it, I guess I've always known that you could go in and make an offer on those pieces of property.
Most people don't know which lots Brandon owns. I must say, this is the first time I've ever seen this.
You do when you look at the tax map. When you look at the tax map, you can come in and say, well, yes, town of Brandon owns these swamp lots, and
They have jobs.
if I want to make an offer on that, I'd be able to.
Well, you don't have to go to the town office. The town office is online. It's on the town website.
We've had a lot of people.
It's very accessible. Mr. Carr,
Can you counter offer to this guy?
we can do anything we want in that regard.
You tell him it's.
I think that we have a motion that we're gonna have to act on.
Yeah, no, I understand that,
Yeah.
it's just for discussion, but, say we'll take $500. Because Doug's right, why would you want to lose money?
You could just ask them to cover the legal cost of selling the property, too. It's not unreasonable.
I guess I was going to rescind the motion and ask that he cover all costs of selling the property.
You want to amend your motion to say that we accept the offer contingent on the buyer paying for all the legal costs associated with the town noticing.
Whatever needs to be done.
Noticing and closing. Does that cover the town's cost, noticing and closing?
We can do that moving forward with any of them.
Is there a second to the amendment?
Yeah. Yes.
Mr. Fuller seconds the amendment. Is there discussion on the amendment?
Well, and I'll just once again say that there are people who are willing to pay more than that for this land. And so if there's already that possibility, it seems unfair to not allow those people to make an offer on this land.
I somewhat concur with Tim in that we have 3 adjoining landowners, Williams, Rosen, and Mahoney, that also land abuts this piece of land. They may be willing to pay more. So I wonder if it's worthy of a letter to those landowners saying, we have had an offer to sell lot number so-and-so. If you're interested, now's your time to make an offer and get our best return. I understand getting it on the tax rolls, but I also think that the tax assessment on this is going to be so low, we're going to get a $20 check once a year. It's not going to be a big one then.
And I appreciate that, we didn't know about this till he brought it up. And so he's serving a certain purpose by making a $100 offer. Because it's saying, hey, you know, here's this thing, it doesn't seem to have any value, here's $100. But the fact that he's brought that up, and now it raises the point that there are people that actually are now showing interest in it, seems like we should then follow that through and allow the process to play out and get the top value for our town. I mean, it's our fiduciary responsibility to try to maximize the value of the things we sell.
Further discussion? Further public input? Mr. Rosenberger?
How long has this property been up for, you know?
About 80 years.
Okay, 80 years. Now somebody finally makes an offer, which we're possibly going to accept. And now all of a sudden everybody's, well, I didn't know it was for sale, and I didn't know it was for sale, and I'll pay this, and I'll pay that. That's baloney.
It really wasn't for sale, it was just property owned by
Well,
the town.
it was available, if somebody wanted to find out about it, you know. I don't know, I think you're better off just selling it and forgetting about it.
Further comment? Further discussion? Okay, so let's be careful how we vote. We have an amendment first. So the first vote would be those in favor of amending the motion to state that the offer is contingent on the buyer paying the legal and closing costs, noticing and closing costs.
Okay.
Right.
It's advertising.
Yeah, advertising. Is that clear to everybody on board?
Plus $100?
Yes. So this is to amend the motion to include, in addition to the purchase price, the noticing and closing costs for the property. All in favor of amending the motion in that way, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no.
No.
Any abstentions? That was 4 and 1, right? So now we have a main motion. The main motion to vote is whether to accept the offer of $100 plus noticing and closing costs, legal costs, for the lot in question. Ready to vote, or is there further discussion?
Well, I will say this, if we vote to sell this land, I'm going to, during this same period, because we're talking about consider sale of town-owned property, I'm going to offer to pay $100 for the remaining 3 properties that are on this map. And I expect it to be treated equally.
Fair enough.
Great.
Further discussion? All right, ready to vote on the motion to accept the offer of $100 plus the legal costs we've amended the motion with. Say aye.
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 Opposed, say no.
No.
No. That fails 2 to 3.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Cox?
Just something really quick. Dave kind of brought up a good point. You know how the state treasurer has the unclaimed funds?
Right.
Apply for it? What if we just had a listing of town properties that are available for sale and had it, probably just a sheet, have it in the town report every year?
That is an excellent addition to the town report, but too late for this one.
I understand that. Moving forward, because like Steve made a good point here, he said, nobody knows that, oh, that piece of land is available.
I think that would be a very worthwhile future addition to the town report, and I hope that the
You got it all
board
sold
at
at
that
that
time, I hope that the board at that time considers it. And honestly, I think the town would be well served if it proactively listed before the next town report the lots that it owns, that it is ready to take offers on.
Well, can I ask a favor?
Please.
That before we do this again, because we did go down this, pretty much probably this conversation word for word a year ago, that the board come up with some
A
process
policy.
that they want to do, so we don't have to have this conversation again. It would make my job a lot easier.
I think the board should create a policy relative to disposal of town-owned properties.
Thank you.
Perhaps that could be considered at the reorganizational meeting. I don't think this is an opportune time to draft.
Well, I will apologize for saying that I had intended to make a policy for this when I first got on the board and discovered it, and have not done it. So So this is just a good reminder, and I will make sure to have a policy option for our next select board meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Frankowitz?
Some of that property that the town owns, there's some restrictions on it, such as those on Newton Road, where you cannot build on it again.
Some of them are unbuildable, absolutely.
Would that be in this list of things?
It could be. It runs with the land forever, yeah. It's a restriction that runs with the land forever. So
let them know that it's
all they know, there's a
restricted.
7-page deed recorded with all the language in it, so, it's.
And, we've talked about, there are certain things that on undevelopable land you can still do. You can still plant it as a garden. You can still use it as a, hunting.
Skating rink and baseball
You
field.
can do certain temporary uses or seasonal uses or permanent uses that don't involve structures. Yeah, it can be usable, but generally not developable. Thank you for that. Great discussion. Good job, everybody. Item 9, approval or consideration, it should say, of a policy on consideration of state and federal matters. This is something that I brought to the board last meeting, and we discussed, and it was requested to lay it over a meeting, as we generally do with policies, and we have laid it over a meeting. And so I would, for the purpose of this meeting, move its adoption again.
I will make a motion that we adopt the policy to consider the state and federal matters as our policy for the town of Brandon.
I'll take that as a second to my motion. And is there discussion on the policy?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Scott.
For the purposes of tonight's meeting, I'll just briefly restate my concern that I think this errs on the side of limiting debate, and that I think we already have all of the powers that this policy intends to put forward. And while I agree with many of the provisions in it, my feeling is that we already have these abilities, and that to further tighten them would be shifting the balance away from open discussion in our community. Did you get that, Charlotte? Thank you.
My view is that the forum of the discussion is basically what this policy is directed toward. It's not directed toward limiting discussion in our community or in our town meeting, as was brought out at the last select board meeting, or among a group of people at a coffee shop or at the dump or whatever. It's directed at the forum of the select board, which is a public body meeting in public, but not a meeting of the public. And this policy is directed toward simply controlling the interest of the select board to be able to do its business, do its authorized duties, and not let meetings run away.
It seems like we already have those. So can you give me an example of something where that we would need this policy that we don't have covered by what we do so far?
Well, what we do so far would be like making a decision on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
And making decisions on a case-by-case basis tends to leave the board open to criticism that we're allowing discussion on this issue and not on that issue because it matches or does not match our own personal inclinations. Having a policy that applies to all cases that is, we're not going to act on stuff that we don't have authority to act on is just common sense and also equitable treatment of people who would come to the board from either direction.
I guess I like the latitude that our current situation has where we can make a judgment on a case-by-case basis. And I worry that the policy is going to constrict that latitude. That I don't think we've got a problem with. It's a little bit like if it isn't broke, don't fix it. And that's why, again, I'm looking for an example where we've fallen short on this, where we've somehow needed this policy and said, boy, I wish we had a policy like this.
This is a preventative policy, trying to avoid the experiences that other towns have experienced so that we don't have to go through it in Brandon.
And so we're speaking specifically of Pittsford and their gun sanctuary?
That is an example. That is not the only example, but that is a nearby and proximate in time and place example.
Well, and let there be no mistake, I share the concern that you have on that exact issue. But I feel that we have the robust capacity to handle that issue now. I think if that situation arose in Brandon, we would have the capacity to hear people's concerns and allow the community to speak if they so chose. And at some point, bring the discussion to a close and say, we don't have any authority over this, and move on. And so I think we still have all of those tools.
I would say we have tonight received, this is through the League of Cities and Towns, evidently. Yes.
This was a letter to executive director.
Right, so we have, this is new since our last meeting, and that's the only reason I bring it up. Most of what Mr. Giles and I just talked about is kind of a restatement of what we talked about last time. But this is new. This is from the Attorney General, State of Vermont, to the Executive Director of the League of Cities and Towns. And I won't read the whole letter into the minutes. Did Charlene get a copy of it? Would you attach it to the minutes? And I think it's fair to say that it's, in summary, it is saying, or I'll read the sentence that's the key sentence. Laws enacted by the General Assembly, including those that regulate firearms, are the laws of the state, and they're binding. Cities and towns cannot opt out of compliance with state and federal law. Any resolution that purports to do so has no legal effect. I think that they're telling us, don't bother doing resolutions on stuff that you have no authority to do resolutions.
Well, and similarly, they're saying that you don't need a policy to not have to worry about making rules that you don't have power to make rules over.
I don't take that from that letter.
Okay, that's what I take from it.
I'm concerned about having meetings and having input on meetings on something that we can't enact anyway. I mean, that's just going to invite us to have people come in and talk to us about gun laws or any other kind of law. And then at the end of the night, we're just being able to say, oh, thanks for the conversation, but we're in the wrong place. So I don't think 5 people should be able to make those rules. So that's why I'm in favor of the resolution.
I think the two situations that I'm trying to contrast is currently, Seth leads a brilliantly efficient meeting. We've had some meetings as short as 2 minutes. When we've done alcohol commission meetings, boom, 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 we get things done. And I am confident that you have the capacity to limit debate when necessary, when we are to the point where we can't go forward in debate. I worry about the other commission, where supposing somebody comes forward with something they'd like to talk about, and one person on the board says, oh, we have a policy that we aren't supposed to talk about this. Now it takes a majority of the board to overturn that. And unless that person has been able to gather enough of what they're interested in to actually convey the importance of their concern or their message, it's now possible that the board will not vote in the majority to overturn our policy and allow them to continue speaking, and will unnecessarily limit debate, when presently they would be allowed to say their piece and we could handle them as we do with our current tools. So that's the issue that I'm concerned with.
So further discussion or public comment, Mr. Bueller?
I had a question about policy, because the state has, let's take Airbnbs for instance. They have an ordinance or regulation about Airbnbs. It's very weak. It's not safety oriented necessarily, or it doesn't level the playing field with bed and breakfast hotels. But they have this ordinance. So would the town of Brandon have a discussion and adopt a stricter ordinance, or would they shut it off and say, well, the state has an ordinance on that and we won't discuss it?
Oh no, so the town is allowed to act on the general oversight. The select board is allowed to act on the general oversight of the affairs of the town. Economic development, public health, licensing of businesses, all of those things are like the normal course of town government. And town governments all over Vermont and beyond, as a matter of course, will take a state law and go further than it. And I don't think that that would have any...
That wouldn't affect
This is directed
whether it's
at-
cannabis, Airbnb, whatever, they could bring it
Well, whatever,
in the select board.
like, so
would
the state
discuss
has talked about cannabis, right? And they haven't come up with the law yet, but they've talked about in many cases whether they're going to allow communities to opt in or opt out, like all these things.
it. Right.
We're going to have to follow what they set up for parameters that they specifically give to the select boards of the towns of Vermont to say yes or no to. This is more directed at, you know, we're not going to enforce any, for example, gun control in Brandon. because-
Well, I guess what I'm talking about, maybe more enforcement rather than less enforcement, since the state already has.
Yeah, I think more is...
More is allowed.
More is allowed, except like to use the
Less
gun
is allowed.
example, the state has said, no, there is no local select board authority to have
Right.
further
More.
gun
Gun.
rules.
Right.
You can't do that in Vermont. And so we just have to pay attention
It's
to
not
what
like
our
that.
elected legislators have enacted. Further discussion? Ready?
And that issue has come up. I mean, I have received phone calls on both sides of the cannabis issue, saying that if the state
Yeah, I know.
makes it be legal,
Mhm.
why don't we not allow it in Brandon? And I've had people say, well, even if the state says it's not legal, why don't we allow it in Brandon? And again, I think it's a bigger issue than 5 selectmen at the front of the
No, that's-
should try to handle.
Mr. Chair. It has been a big topic in Montpelier is self-governance too, and that this could be the challenge right now, that how do the boards deal with this? Because I'm sure they're watching. So, just throwing that out there.
Mr. Moore?
And I just had something that, I think, and as a member of the public, I like this policy in that it helps sort of direct people to the space where they should be doing this. And whether that's at town meeting and having a properly warned article or something that's brought on their business, or contacting your state legislator, your representatives, to act on that on your behalf versus coming to a board that can do nothing to further that cause for them.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. Further discussion? Ready to vote? All in favor of the policy as it was presented last week and resubmitted this week, or last meeting, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no.
No?
There were no abstentions, so that was 4-1. Before we get to fiscal, there's something in the way here. There's something about the,
No, that's actually fiscal A.
oh, you're right, yep. Item 8, approve construction of town hall sidewalk roof. Thanks, Mr. Atherton, for pointing that out. So that this is what's, it appears before the purchase order and warrants. You want to tell us about it?
So, because it's above my spending limit, the cost for the construction of our roof that we want to do out here is $28,151. And need board approval before we move forward with it.
Have you had any, you introduced this previous meeting or 2 meetings ago? Something like that? It's been recently introduced. Have you had any public comment regarding it, or anything from the Friends of Town Hall regarding it?
So, well, the Friends, at one of the meetings, I did say they were gonna contribute $15,000 to this. I think it was 15.
I thought it was 10, yeah, but
No, I thought it was 15. 15 or 10, yeah, 10, one or the other. To the construction cost, so.
So in concept, you would say, you would take that as being the Friends of Town Hall are pleased with the design?
Yes.
And
So-
believe it will solve the problem of the ice and so forth?
I have sent this stuff to Dennis every time we get new information, so, you know.
Yeah, I move that we approve the construction of the town hall sidewalk roof.
Motion by Mr. Giles and a second by Mr. Wyman. Is there discussion?
So the
On
only
this.
thing we might change on this is that in the last sentence, They do have a cost for pre-primed pine versus lifespan of pine, and the pre-primed pine, say that 3 times fast. It usually doesn't hold up as well, because it's usually like joint boards and stuff, so, I'd like to maybe add that $1,000 in to cover the cost of stuff that's not gonna rot.
And we are still kind of working on a not to exceed number, right? Because he had one number, he wasn't entirely sure of, the pile driver man or firm. Okay.
And we have funds for this within our budget?
We've moved some things around, but yes, we can manage to pull this one off, so. It's gonna be cheaper than a lawsuit, I still.
Yes. So is there an amendment to be made to the not to exceed figure?
Do we need to give a not to exceed figure? I mean,
When we approve
Can we
money,
not-
we must have the dollar figure. Not to exceed.
I
Yes.
requested to be 30,000.
I was
You
gonna
could
say
request it
30,
to be a round number.
Can I amend my
Yes.
motion to say $30,000 maximum?
Yes, and who had the second?
I did.
Is that acceptable?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so now the motion is amended to say not to exceed $30,000. Further discussion? All in favor of authorizing an amount not to exceed $30,000 to construct the Brandon Town Hall entry sidewalk roof as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. That's great.
May I ask a question?
Mr. Bueller?
Will the snow still be on town property when it falls off of this?
Probably not all of it.
Okay.
So, the reason that we've been able to do this is the folks that live there now witnessed the snow come flying off that roof
Yeah,
2 years ago.
yeah.
And it scared the crap out of him. He came over like,
Okay.
white as a ghost, and said, my gosh, we've got to do something about this, so.
Okay, but they're aware of it and
Yes.
they're part of it, okay. I just,
Yes.
thank you.
That's important, and it would not have been wise to proceed. That's actually why this has been talked about in previous years and not
Right.
pursued, because we're right on our property line
Yeah,
on that end of
Yeah,
the building.
no, thank you for that, I appreciate it.
Thank you for noting. Second item, a purchase order to G-Star Motors, Mr. Heatherton.
So, well, this is the police cruiser that was approved, when was the PO done? Almost a year ago, I think. And they had to order the truck, so it's time for us to pick it up.
Can you clarify that? It was, what do you mean it was approved?
You guys had approved the purchase order for this, when was it?
Before I was.
Quite a while ago.
Many months ago.
And why did we wait?
Because they had to get the truck.
Oh, the dealer.
Yeah.
Ah. Thank you.
Sure.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Make a motion to approve.
Mr. Weiner moves to approve. Is there a second? Mr. Coolidge seconds. So the motion before us is to approve the purchase order to G-Stone Motors for a 2020 Ford F-150 police package truck, less the trade. Further, is there any discussion?
The only question I got, we already approved it. Why are we approving it again?
It's in the warrant.
Why are we approving it again? Do they need a current purchase
We
order?
always do that with a car, we bring it to you for.
Yeah, but I thought you said we already approved it a year ago, or?
Picking it up now.
Oh, okay.
I'm safe and sorry.
So this is perhaps a confirmation of the board's
It's a
intent
confirmation purchase order.
and a reminder. Okay. Further discussion?
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Bueller?
I didn't see the warrant package on the website this time,
Was the warrants, were the warrants?
but they updated my computer, so who knows?
Yeah, Lane does them every Friday, so.
Okay,
And what
I
else might
I
be?
didn't see it,
Usually gets them.
couldn't find it, so
I don't know.
usually,
Can't speak to that.
the last one was the
I can tell
10th.
you right now. actually.
No, okay, yeah.
So is it possible that this was
It didn't come up on your side.
authorized prior to my being on the board?
Yeah.
Was it that long ago?
Yeah, that would have been.
Great, thank you.
It's been a while since this one was ordered.
Yeah.
So is this, what fiscal year?
Well, we budget a
This
half
is
a
the half
cruiser
and half.
every year,
So
so.
it's like last year and
When was the last year we bought one? Through 2 years ago?
This is approved in discussion with the board at the last budget cycle.
Yeah. It's been a while.
It has been a while.
Well, you think too, when we order a truck or
It's kind
highway,
of amazing.
it's almost a year before they build it. So we don't take delivery on it for over a year after the approval for the truck goes. So it does take a while.
And this is taking advantage of the state pricing and so forth, I assume. Right? We always do that, right? Further discussion? Ready to vote? All in favor of the purchase order presented, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions?
I abstain because I wasn't part of the original decision.
Fair enough. 401. Item D, the Route 7 construction warrant.
I'll make a motion.
Is that correct?
No, it's the regular one.
No, I missed the, item C, the regular warrant. Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve the regular warrant, $1,148,391.92.
It is?
Motion by Mr. Coolidge. Second by Mr. Wyman. Any questions on the warrant as it's been presented?
Yes.
Yes.
Page 5 of 6. Stone CD Junior, I'm just kind of wondering, one is, this said repair of the F-550 and then dash insurance, so is that, we're buying insurance,
No, the truck was, that was the 550 that was damaged in January, and Stone, which was Foster Motors, did the repair work on the cab, and it was an insurance claim.
So it will be reimbursed from insurance? or-
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, minus our deductible.
And there's two of those right in a row, so there's a 45 and then a 300, so they're both the same vehicle?
No, wait, what did we buy for the 300 one or something else? Oh, no, it is, it's for both of them.
Okay.
Other questions? If not, all in favor of the warrant for $1,148,391.92, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Item D, Route 7 construction warrant.
I'll make a motion to approve the warrant amount of $42,528.37.
Mr. Bailey moves to approve. Mr. Wyman seconds. Any discussion?
And I'll just ask for confirmation, you've had a look at the warrants?
Yes, I have.
Like they're,
You actually caught me doing it twice today, too, when walking.
it's true.
Ready to vote? All in favor of the construction warrant, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. The ayes have it. So at this time, the board will recess for a couple of executive sessions and liquor commission meeting. Yeah, we'll do the liquor commission's meeting first. And then we will come back to public session to adjourn. Thank you very much.